Hello, Garland Nixon here, and it looks like the Neocon project in Ukraine is on its last breath. It may fool us, but I don't think so. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. All right. Oh, my camera's a little crooked, little crooked. Um, yeah, let's talk about this. The Neocon project. I'm saying it's on its last leg. The discussion about the Ukraine conflict oftentimes is about the length. How long will it last, right? Will this be days, months, years, or whatever? And initially, I think I felt as though, and again, I'm just giving some speculation here, and we're going to work our way forward. Initially, I didn't feel that it would be long, and it was a matter of ignorance. I had no idea, this vastness of the armies and the size of the battlefield, et cetera, et cetera. But now, as time comes on, it gets clear that this is, in fact, the contact line, the line of fighting along the front is like 1,000 kilometers or something like this. So this is a huge area of fighting, a lot of troops involved, and the U.S. empire, being a participant in the battle, has done everything that it can to provide as much intelligence and information as it can to Ukraine for them to be able to execute whatever they are able to execute. One of the things that has become obvious is, I think, in recent weeks, and I think that's very pertinent to this discussion, is that there is a limit as to how much military hardware the Western sponsors of the Ukrainian proxy army can come up with. And that's why I feel as though, I did early May, I did a video, and I just was like, I feel like this thing is getting closer and closer to the end. I don't feel like this thing gets through the summer. Could be wrong. Could be completely wrong. This thing could go on for years. Mark Sloboda says he thinks it's going to go on for years, and God knows Mark Sloboda knows far more about being an international security analyst than I do. Got a lot of respect for the guy. But, we're all going to throw our 2 cents in and see what it happens. Maybe his is $1 and mine is 12 cents, but I'm going to throw my 12 cents in. And I don't feel, because the term that I've used from the beginning, and the term that I've used, collapse. So, I don't think that it's a war that goes on and on and on. And then at some point, there's a stalemate, or that at some point, one side or the other slowly starts to weaken. And the side that would slowly start to weaken would be, of course, the Ukrainians, because the Russians ain't. And that at some point, there would just become obvious to everybody that they need to talk and work out a deal. And the question is about the deal, right? That's kind of the narrative that we hear about this thing, and particularly in the Western press. The Western press is, for some time, it went from, the Russians are out of missiles, the Russians are using washing chips out of washing machines to put in their missiles, they are in desperation, they're going down, they got their third finger up or whatever, right? They're sinking, and they won't be able to make it. To, it's a stalemate. Oh my gosh, they'll just fight forever, and there will just be this forever stalemate. And now we're starting to see even more realistic. The Western press has devolved into a more realistic and cynical view, such as myself, where you can actually read at times articles that say things ain't looking so good for the Ukrainians on the front, where they actually have to. I'll put it like this: there was Patrick Lawrence did an interesting article, and he followed up a New Yorker story that was on the front lines in Bakhmut. And let's just say, if you read that story, you didn't feel like things were looking real positive for the Ukrainian military. It was basically saying they were doomed, that they were getting mangled, torn to shreds. They didn't have enough equipment. They didn't have enough. They didn't have trained soldiers. People were being thrown on the front lines. It was not a pretty story. And my immediate position on that, my immediate thought was the New Yorker, an article that says that things are going really bad for the Ukrainians on the front line. My thought was this, and I think there are a lot of people that agree with me, that the West, there are elements in the West that sees what's coming. and they can see what's happening, and they're going to maybe start trying to prepare uh their audience, shall we call them, right? The dupes, the blue and yellow flag flying dupes, the ones that actually believe that the U.S. is standing for independence and sovereignty and all the other absurd rhetoric. They're trying to prepare those people for a letdown. And in fact, one of the things that they always try to do is try to make it like you're acting in a way that's benevolent. Oh, we're looking out for them. So now that they've thrown the Ukrainians out for cannon fodder for a year and a half, they're like, okay, oh crap, we may need to get out of this. So let's make it look like we're saving the poor Ukrainians who are on the front line suffering, that we're going to act in a benevolent way now, and we're going to get them out of this mess. So I think there's an element in the neocon class that wants out, and they're starting to try to maybe, soften the beachhead, as they say, prep the people for what's to come. Now, of course, they're the Tony Blinkens and the et al., right? Tony Blinken and his bunch of crazy neocons who are still holding on for dear life. I read recently that Tony Blinken was saying that a peaceful resolution would be a bad thing. And of course, if you understand Tony Blinken, sorry about drinking a little bit of tea. If you understand Tony Blinken, you understand that anything involving peace with that goal is going to be considered a bad thing. So Tony Blinken, peace, not good. That which is Tony Blinken, right? Anytime you say, hey, Tony Blinken, what do you think about peace? Oh, no, peace, man. I ain't interested in that stuff. Are you kidding me? We could needlessly save hundreds of thousands of lives. Not going to happen. So Blinken and his people are still holding out. And implied in these comments I just made, right? If you think about it, implied in these comments that I just made is that there are various neocon elements, various elements in the ruling elite. And one may use the term factions, right? Various factions in the ruling elite who don't necessarily agree on everything. But always remember that people tend to think that the factions of the ruling elite are all agree on everything, and everything is a smooth, perfect operation. They give these people a lot more credit than they are due. I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a very high-ranking person in the 1980s, 90s at a newspaper, an international newspaper in Washington, D.C., very high-ranking guy. And he said he had this discussion about some people who were on the inside, real, and at the time, that people were neocons. He knew these insiders. He was at this conservative newspaper. And he said, basically, in this discussion, that he was talking to this guy about I think at the time it might have been the Iraq War, but he was talking to them about the mistakes that were made and how much of them were accident and how much of them were planned, and how smart were these people. And the guy basically told them, these people are idiots. Don't fool yourself into thinking that they're planning their way through this stuff. That these screw ups that they're doing are because they're incompetent boobs, not because they had some great plan. You interpret what they're doing to be some brilliant plan. In reality, they're incompetent boobs. And when it comes to the Newlands and the Blinkens and the Sullivans of this world, that's what I always go with. I'm not one of these people that say, oh yeah, Garland, they've got this plan. First, they're going to do this. Then they're going to fool us this way. And then they're so brilliant. They have some intricate plan. They're idiots. They're idiots, and they're stumbling through this thing, and they're putting out fires, and they're reacting from one thing to the other. And the cat is out of the bag in Ukraine, because, and here's what I think, really, in my opinion, kind of finished them off. And that is their own stupidity of saying, and I've had this discussion many times with you guys, right? Yes, I'm going to punch you in the face when next Thursday at 4 p.m. between 4 and 5. You'll be preparing from now until Thursday to do something to counter my plan to punch you in the face Thursday. Well, and these idiots, for narrative reasons, broadcasting that they were going to do this great narrative, this huge counterattack, as they call it. More normal people call it an attack. They're calling it a counterattack, implying that the Russians are going to attack them, and then they're going to counterattack. The Russians weren't planning on attacking them. They were planning on attack. How cognizant are these people of the importance of their narrative? They're going to launch an offensive attack, and they name it a counterattack just so they can pretend that the Russians are attacking them first. They just use the words, yes, I'm going to counterpunch that guy. Really? Is he going to punch you first? No, I'm punching him first, but I'm just calling it a counter punch because that way it won't look like I'm the guy that hit first, right? So they get their counterattack. Well, they blabbed for months. Oh boy, we the Russians in March, April, man, they're going to get it now. And then they start talking about all the gear they got to bring in and all of the artillery shells and all the things they need to prep for the counterattack. And if you're the Russians, you're like, I think that means you got to bring this gear in and store it in like warehouses and things and bring it in, bring lots of stuff in, which means if I'm the Russians and I got all kinds of spy planes and spy satellites and all, I'm watching. I'm watching Poland. I'm watching the US. I'm watching ships land. I'm watching planes land. I'm saying, look at this, a plane's coming from South Korea. What if that's got whatever shells on it? I'm watching that. I'm watching where it lands. I'm saying, oh, trucks come off. Oh, they went here. I'm watching everything. And I'm looking. And now I'm seeing all of these trucks and trains all come to this one area, unload their stuff and leave, unload their stuff and leave. And I'm like, okay, well, that looks like a likely area to hit. I don't know what's there, but whatever it is, there's a lot of it. And it's been coming in, interestingly enough, in the weeks and months prior to the this offensive that they've been announcing. I know I'll just blow it up and see what happens. That's pretty much what I think the Russians were doing. These idiots were blabbing, yeah, we're going to bring in the gear and store it, and then we're using it against the Russians. And the Russians were like, well, we'll just see where you store gear and blow all that stuff up. And so basically it appears to me what the Russians have been doing is watching in the last couple of weeks, what have we seen? Relentless drone, which are cheap, right? Cheap drones, drone and missile attacks, relentless on the Ukrainians. And my suspicion is that they're doing it's something that I said before, you know, in self-defense, one of the many things and mind games and all is to strike someone where they breathe, the solar plexus, strike someone in the chest, or strike someone, period, between breaths, where they breathe in and they breathe out. And right between that out, when there's no breath and they haven't breathed in, you strike them, wham! Right. And supposedly what that does is not that I've ever done it or anything, but supposedly what that does is it throws off the timing of a person's breathing. They don't have any oxygen because, you know, you hit somebody, right? And so that is, and of course, it would be followed up by a lot of other strikes and all, but it would throw the person's timing and breathing and body and rhythms and everything off, and then give them a much less chance of, you know, of countering whatever you were doing. Here's my point. Why do I say that? Because I think that's what we're looking at. It's the, and I've talked about this before. You catch somebody when he draws back his fist to hit you. If he's not going to just go straight out and hit, he's going to draw back. He didn't know what he's doing. That's a lot of time to draw way back here. Well, by then he should be hit 3 times. And then he goes way up here to throw that punch, right? Well, you catch him back here, and that's when you strike. You catch him when he's prepping to strike. Jeet Kune Do is the intercept the fist, and ultimately it becomes that you interrupt the thought before it goes from the mind to the fist, right? It's intercepting what's happening. It's saying this is what you're going to do, and we're going to catch you not when you do it. We're going to catch you when you're preparing it to do it. We're going to catch you when you're really planning on do it, just before your preparation. You know, and there's a period of time. Who is it? One of these monk groups have a term, and what that means is, I can't remember the term, but what it means is before you do something, just before you do it, just before you have the thought to do it, right? Just before you get ready to do it, just before you even know you're going to do it, there's a before, just before that, and to act just before that happens, just before a person thinks about doing something, plans it, but it's there way down in a seed to happen, right? So it's catching a person in preparation or just prior to the preparation. You have a continuum of preparation when the person starts thinking, I'm going to do it, when they start preparing to do it, when they get ready. Now, you know, it's like, I'm going to do something to you. I think I'm angry at you. Now the mind is coming up to do something. Oh, I think I'm going to hit you with a pipe. Well, I guess that means I better procure a pipe. I better practice swinging the pipe. I better find out where you're going to be. Then I got to go to you, and then I got to hit you with the pipe. I've got a series of things I have to go through before I hit you with that pipe, if I'm going to hit you with the pipe, right? And just before I get ready to do it, you could say, I'm going to let him get the pipe and get ready and all this kind of stuff. And just before he swings, I'm going to take him out. Or you could say, Garland's going to go so I go procure a pipe. That's the pipe I'm hitting you with. And I put it in my car and I say, tomorrow I'm getting up and I'm driving over to Bill's house. I'm hitting him with the pipe. What you could do is come in overnight, break my window out, steal the pipe. And I come in, I'm getting him. I look, oh no, my pipe's gone. I can't get him. You've taken the weapon. I think that's where the Russians are. The Russians, I believe, are in that period of time between when they planned on, when the sponsors, the patrons of the Europeans planned on attacking, and the attack. I think they're in that period of time from when I say I'm going to punch you, I'm going to launch that counterattack in um, May per se, right? When I come up with that plan and I announce to everybody, I'm going to go get the Russians in May. That's a time period. Some people argue just before you plan that there's a time period if you can pick it up, but there's a time period. 2, all the things I have to do between me and May, and between now and May, and launch the counter attack. You see what I mean? There is a series of events, all kinds of things that Ukraine and its sponsors had to do in preparation for that. And I think the Russians' military plan was, we're going to get in that window. You've heard the term OODA loop, right? We're going to get in that window between when I say I'm going to attack and when I attack. All the things, you're going to bring the stuff in there. Now, do I want to attack before you get the stuff there? No. And do I want to attack when you're bringing it in? No, because I don't want you to know that I know what you're doing and where you're bringing it. I want to let you I want to identify where you're bringing this stuff in. I want to let you bring in as much as I possibly can. Then I want to hit it. That's why we saw that huge mushroom cloud a couple of weeks ago over this gigantic series of warehouses that apparently was some kind of an ammunition depot. And apparently what the Russians did was they just waited. Keep bringing it in, keep bringing it in. Yeah, that looks like you're finished. That's enough. Boom, they hit it and blow it up. And it looks like what the Russians have been doing is utilizing intelligence to figure out where the stuff is going to come in, even how they're going to transport it. They've been hitting railroad lines. They've been hitting warehouses around transport lines. So what the Russians have been doing is looking at how they're bringing the stuff in, how they're bringing the people, and now they interrupt that. Now the trains are gone. It makes it harder. You got to use buses or cars or something to move your trucks. I've knocked out some bridges for trains. I've knocked out some of the warehouses where you're storing the stuff in trains along the way. So basically, the Russians disrupted, in a nutshell, it appears to me, the Russians disrupted the plan. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to get you. I got all these things I need to do, and then I'm going to launch my offense. If you get in that period of time where I got to do all these things and disrupt them, you let me bring in my ammo, you blow it up. You see how I'm going to move my troops, you blow up some of the train lines. You hit some of the trains. You hit some of the power stations. You make it harder to move trains. So you're making it extremely difficult for me to muster the troops together. You're seeing tanks and things coming, you want to hit them. So now it's harder for me to muster my troops to the front to attack. It's harder for me to get the gear to them because you're attacking that gear. I haven't even got to my counteroffensive and I'm already losing gear. I haven't even got to fire my first counteroffensive salvo of artillery or whatever it may be, and I'm losing artillery. I'm not even getting to fire it. It's getting blown up before it gets. So at some point, I think at some point, and this is where we've gotten to, it gets to a point where politically the patrons of the Ukrainian proxy army have painted themselves in a corner, the leader patrons, by saying to their vassals, stick with us, man, when come spring, we're going to hit the Russians hard. Just stay, you wait and see. Now, because I think a lot of countries were ready to get off. This thing ain't working well for them. And I think the main patrons, the neocons, the U.S., just stand by. I'm telling you, we're going to punch the Russians in the gut. We're going to knock their teeth out come spring. And everybody can see now the Russians have thrown a monkey wrench in it. Come on. Do you think the Russians were just going to sit on the other side of that? Do you think they were just going to wait? Do you think you could just say, I'm going to get the Russians in May, and they're just going to sit over there, la, 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 knitting, twiddling their thumbs, playing tiddlywinks, and just waiting for you to attack? No, this is a war. They're going to use every what is it? ISR, right? Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. They're going to use everything they can to try to figure out what your plan is and disrupt that plan. And that's what they did. And it seems to have had some success. It's hard. And again, here's the other part. Remember what I said? Like, where's your fist all the way back there, right? And you see that. You're going to strike, pow. You might block, but you might hit them, right? But you're not just going to go bam, and hit them and wait to see what happens. This person's rear their fist back and they're going to let you have it. You're going to hit them, but you're going to keep striking. Bap, 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 bap. Disorient them, hurt them, injure them. Keep throwing the punches. They're going to eventually run, put down, turn around. It's going to be hard for them to counterattack. You just keep punch, 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 and you're going to keep throwing punches, kicks, elbows, anything you can. Bite, scratch. Somebody's attacking you. You get the initiative. You get a punch in. You don't throw one punch. You just keep going. Right? You got the initiative, keep the initiative. And I think what happened is the Russians are, they said, okay. And it appears at some point the Russians were like, okay, you're at the edge of where you're about to you got your stuff together, you got everything together where you want to strike, right? The Russians, I think, started by hitting their ammo depots hard. We saw mushroom clouds going up all over the place. Boom, 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 boom. But it appears that what the Russians did is what somebody would do if they were defending themselves, right? You see a person who's been in prison, a street fighter, a person who knows how to fight. People think that they're trained. Oh, I'll just beat everybody up. These street fighters know how to fight. And one thing about a person in prison, a street fighter, what they know how to do is keep coming if they get the initiative. They're quick, they're fast, they're quick, they're throwing punches, a lot of them. A street fighter's not going to throw a punch and wait and see what happens. They're coming, boom, fists are coming, everything. They may not be trained, but they're throwing everything they can. If they can grab something and hit you with it, if they can throw something over your head, a pillowcase over your head, and yank that pillowcase and pound you while the pillowcase is over your head and you're disoriented, sand in your eyes. Anything, the street fighter, the prisoner, the whoever is fighting for it all, and they're just going to nonstop give it all they got, right? Disoriented person, to strike a person and the first blow injures, disorients them, and then you continue on there until you're victorious, until you can leave, right? So it appeared that the Russians hit them, and it was obvious when they hit those big. And a lot of people who were watching this saw it. It was obvious that when they hit those big ammo dumps, that they had struck gold, right? From their perspective, but they hit with these drones and missiles just kept coming. And the Russians day and night have been pounding them with drones, pounding them. And so I think what they did was they got them disoriented. Hey, what are we going to do? They blew up all this ammo and stuff that we had. And before they could realize what was the plan for the offensive, before they could realize that, they're hitting other stuff. They're hitting, air defense here. They're hitting troop concentrations here. They're hitting whatever they can hit. They're hitting intelligence buildings. You name it, the Russians are throwing punches nonstop. And I think they've got the idea being, we're going to get, when summer comes, so because think about it, they have a period of time in the fall where it's muddy, in the winter where it's crappy, and they were hoping that maybe the ground would get hard, but they'll guarantee, and then there was a warm winter. So really, over the fall, over the winter, and a big part of the spring, nobody could launch offensives or really fight much, but just throw artillery from a distance because the weather was so nasty you couldn't move through that stuff with vehicles, not even tracked vehicles, right? So I think what the Russians did was they planned. They threw artillery. They did fought what they could, but they planned that when the summer gets here, we're going to have all these drones. We're going to have all these things made and ready to strike, to make their big hit. Not necessarily one sweeping offensive, but it doesn't have to be. I'll put it like this: that a woman that's trained can defeat a man. She doesn't have to have a powerful blow that knocks him out. He grabs her. She pokes him in the eyes. He jumps back. She kicks him in the groin. He jumps back. She throws a punch to his throat. He jumps back. He's studied. He comes back at her again. Man, she's kicking. She's, really laying it to him. He don't want no parts of that. She doesn't have to be stronger. She doesn't have to be bigger. She just has to be trained and throw a lot of punches and stun them. I think the Ukrainian military is back on their heels. Boom, they got hit. There's whoa, we're stunned. Now you've got their patrons, as I was getting at earlier, saying, man, we put all this money in it. We put all this political capital. They spent the Biden people spent a lot of political capital. They ran around the world asking for favors. We need guns. We need this. We need that. So they're going around the world begging with hat in hand. They're sending, what's his name? Zelensky around the world with hat in hand, begging for stuff. They get the stuff, and then before they can use it, it gets blown up. And now they're in a position now, what do? Because you've got the neocons who really don't care about Ukrainian life. They're cannon fodder anyway. So they're saying, all right, Ukraine, we did all of this work. You go ahead and attack. And the Ukrainians, it seems to me there's a huge element there that's saying, look, you want us to attack these people, it's suicide. It ain't going to work. It's suicide. If we attack, if we go running into heavily entrenched lines, the people have been planning on us, for us. They've been plotting on us. If best case scenario, if we had everything we needed, we'd still be going into entrenched defense lines. And man, that ain't nothing you want to do. But now we're running short of ammo. We're running short of people, and we don't have any air cover. And every time we turn on one of our anti-aircraft systems, they blow it to smithereens. And oh, by the way, every time we turn on one of your anti-aircraft systems, they blow it to smithereens. So if we go in there and we have, let's just say, miscalculated, and the Russians say, we've been waiting for this. And they say, because the Russians have not been using their aircraft. What happens? We go in here, we attack the Russians, and the Russians have decided this is what we've been waiting over. Wave after wave of bombers. The Russian bombers come in, carpet bombing, blue, 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 Operation Rolling Thunder. So there is a potential for these, there is a potential, not saying it'll happen, for the Ukrainians to come in and walk into just the trap of all traps and just get a massacre of, of biblical proportions. That is the potential. What would happen? I don't know. I would have to guess, based on what I've seen, that because they are not adequately prepared, if you're going to attack a dug-in enemy, you need 3 to 1. They're going to probably be facing 1 to 3 or 1 to 5. So they're going to attack an enemy that outnumbers them, that has aircraft protection and aircraft, and you have none. They've been digging in for months, and you're going to run into that. It's like jumping into a wood chipper. Literally like jumping into a wood chipper, because you're going to get torn to shreds, and they're going to get torn to shreds. So we've got a situation where it's obvious now that it's a kamikaze. If they attack the Russians, it's a kamikaze mission. That's all it is. It's a kamikaze mission. Same way if they bring F-16s. You put a pilot in the F-16 with S-400s all over the place, S-300, S-400s, Books, all of these Russian anti-aircraft systems everywhere. You put those F-16s out in that kind of an environment, it's a suicide mission. They're kamikaze planes. They're not, that's all it is. That's all it would be to fly out with. Add all of that to the fact that the Russians would be like, this is going to be a prize. This is going to be a trophy for us to get these F-16s down, right? It would be a kamikaze mission for any pilot that you stick in that goes flying around Ukraine. So now it's decision time for the neocons. I mean, let me find it here. Daily for months now, what do we see? Ooh, any day now, there's going to be an offensive. It's coming. Let's read this. Let's look at this. Let's see what it says. Ukraine ready to launch counteroffensive. Ukraine is ready to launch its long-awaited offensive, right? Again, this is a Wall Street Journal. He said, he did not reveal the exact date, but said Kiev can no longer, quote, wait for months. So we're going to do it. When? Well, we can't wait for months, years, decades. The operation is likely to inflict heavy losses on Ukrainian troops and may not go exactly as planned, Zelensky admitted. Think about that. I think you and I already know that, don't we? It ain't going to go as planned for the Ukrainians, right? So he says it's going to inflict heavy losses. All he said, we're going to throw our soldiers into a meat grinder. Adding that Russia's air superiority would inevitably mean Kiev's forces would be exposed to any enemy fire. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, they were telling us what they're going to do is they're going to take back the land bridge to Transnistria and Crimea. They're going to take back everything. They're going to take back the Donbass. They're going to take back everything. Right now, he's saying things may not go well, and we don't have air superiority. And when he says that, what he means is we don't have any airplanes, and they got airplanes. The president admitted that the military equipment and weapons supplied to Ukraine by its Western backers are still not enough. We would like to have certain things, but we can't wait for months. We, meaning the soldiers you're throwing out there to die. Zelensky also highlighted the need for stronger air defenses and claimed that the U.S.-made Patriot systems are virtually the only ones in the world capable of countering certain Russian missile types. He claimed Ukraine would need as many as 50 Patriot batteries to ensure sufficient air defense. The lack of such protection means a large number of soldiers will die. Now, what is that? Let me say this. Let me talk about that for a second. So Zelensky says we need 50 Patriot systems. If we don't get them, a lot of Ukrainians will die. Well, he knows he ain't getting them, but what is he doing? He knows this, that if they move forward, it's going to be a massacre, and he's looking for a way out. He's saying, yeah, man, we got to have 50. What is it that we could never possibly get? 50 Patriot systems. That's what we need, 50 Patriot systems. If we don't get them, hey, man, these guys are just going to get wiped out. God knows I wouldn't want to be out there if we don't get them. America, if they don't give it to us, our guys are just going to get mangled. You know you're going to get him. You're not going to get him. He's setting himself up for a way out. If we don't get X, which I know we're not going to get, our soldiers will get massacred. Now, if soldiers get massacred, well, I told you if we didn't get X, so it ain't my fault. It's the people that didn't give us X. The rats are jumping off a sinking ship. Anything else? So that's the bottom line. I read no more out of that one. That's the bottom line. That's where we are. We are at a spot where the Ukrainian so-called president, the Ukrainian puppet, the Ukrainian spokesperson for the Biden administration is saying, "Hey, man, this thing's could go bad." Now, imagine you're a soldier on the front line. Imagine if you were a soldier on the front line and they're like, we're going to attack the Russians. Really? Have you heard anything from seen any of our leaders on TV? Yeah. Oh, what are they saying? I mean, they're saying we're screwed. What? They're saying most of us are probably going to die and there's nothing they can do about it. What? Yeah, they're saying they got to get 50 Patriot systems to defend us. They're not going to get the 50 Patriot systems, so they're not going to be able to defend us. So basically, we're all going to die. If you're a Ukrainian you're a Ukrainian soldier sitting on the front line, and that's what you got. That's what you got. That's what your leaders got for you. Wish we had something to save you, but we don't. You're a dead man. That's where the Ukrainians are. And so what we're looking at now is this, a circumstance where there's either one of two things to me. There's either they go ahead with this, and I'm going to use the word loosely, counteroffensive or offensive. And that thing goes real bad. And at that point, and I will say this, there are probably people right now who won't be mad to see that happen. Right? There are probably people looking for a way out. Now, I'm not going to say they're in the US or the EU. I don't know. You guess for yourself. I'm guessing. But people in this systems who are saying, look, I don't see a way out right now. The neocons are knuckleheads. Nobody will listen. Biden, he's three sheets to the wind. I don't know what we're going to do, how we're going to get out of it. But if this offensive were to go bad, we might have a window, right? If they do this offensive and the Ukrainians get slaughtered, just mercilessly slaughtered, which it seems to me the likelihood, they're thinking we might have a window at that point. I don't know how long it'll be, but we got a window and we need to jump on that window. And we need to then say, and I would think that all this business about the Chinese saying they want a peace deal, the Africans saying they want a peace deal, Lula, he's a very powerful man coming out of Brazil saying we want a peace deal, Mexico, all of these countries, that the window that they would see would be this. Okay, the counteroffensive happens and it gets crushed. And then everybody, all the Europeans, their heads are like this. Oh, crap. And the neocons are like, hey, guys, we got to keep fighting. We can't let one little massacre of tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers. We can't let that slow us up. We got to keep moving. That's what the neocons will be doing. But there'll be a certain element that'll be putting their head down saying things ain't looking good, guys. There will be an element who has been waiting, as I said, for this window that will say, hey, over here, remember us. And I think in Europe, that's going to be the business community. They're going to be like this. Oh, hey, guys, over here. Hey, right here. yeah, let's go and get this peace deal now. I'll call the Russians. You want to call them? I'll call them. And Joe, hey, he can call them. Anybody can call them. We can text them. We can email them. Telegram. Telegram's always good to get the Russians. We can use Telegram. Hey, you know, I think it's a Russian program. So certainly we'll get on Telegram. We'll call Vladimir Putin and we'll say, let's get a deal. Let's make a deal, buddy. Hey, things happen. You know, I hope we weren't out of line with all of that Dostoevsky is the book banning stuff, but let's sit down and get a deal. Perhaps we can start moving a little bit of energy between us again. Let's get going. I will guarantee you that the business people in France, the business people in Italy, the business people in Germany are sitting back waiting for a window. So sadly, and you know, in a grotesque way, a cynical way of viewing this, there are probably elements who want the hell out of this mess, don't know how they got in it, know that the future is dire for them, and their position is, let's go ahead, let's have this thing. The neocons want it. These fascists in Ukraine have been begging for their chance to get a bite out of the Russians' hide. Go ahead and let them get a bite out of the Russians' hide. They want a bite out of the Russians' hide. The Russians are that way. AMF, adios mofos, or adios, my friend, right? You head towards the Russians and we'll sit back here and see how many of you return, because it ain't going to be many. So I think that there is an element, and probably in the neocon world, who's thinking the same thing. Let's let Newland and Biden and these people get their offensive. They'll have their offensive. Everything will fall apart. And then we can come in and say, we got to get a deal with the Russians. Time to get out. Let's get a deal. The problem, too, is you know, and I always, whenever I talk about a deal, I always talk about this. From the perspective of the neocons, they can't ever do a deal. So the neocons, in order to get a deal, it will mean that Biden's neocons have been overruled. In order to get a deal, I think you'll almost have to, Blinken and these people almost have to go. I think they'll have to be, in order to get a deal, there'll have to be some kind of an internal war in Foggy Bottom in DC, because the neocons know that if the Ukraine project, they've lost the battle. Okay, look. Let me put it to you like this. Let's look at it, and then we'll talk about what they know. The plan was to have a military conflict that would weaken Russia, and that would allow them to do an economic attack on Russia that would destroy Russia. They could do a diplomatic barrage around the world, force everybody on their side, that people wouldn't do business with Russia. That would further weaken Russia. And then, of course, that would end up in a Russian coup. Vladimir Putin's out of business. They go in and take the country. They own all of it. That was the plan, right? That was it for the neocons. A deal means all of that doesn't happen. None of that happens. That means that means the death of the neocon project overall. That means the death of the Wolfowitz plan, the Wolfowitz doctrine, which basically said the U.S. is going to rule the world and no one else. Remember, from the neocon perspective, in his perspective of empire, the outcome of this must be that the U.S. continues to rule the world and no one can challenge it. The problem is this. In fact, that was dead when the Russians challenged them in Syria and won. When the Russians challenged them in Kazakhstan and kicked them out of Kazakhstan. When the Russians challenged them in Belarus, and they stopped that. When the Iranians here a couple months back, when they tried to do some tomfoolery in Iran and started to get Iranian protests, and that fell apart. The bottom line is this: the ability of the neocons to go into countries, do color revolutions or what have you, is very, very weak. It ain't what it used to be. They still can overthrow a government here and there and do, a little bit of problems here and there. Maybe they can influence some election, things of that nature. But just to go in and take these countries, it ain't easy. It's almost impossible. If Russia and China doesn't want them to take a country, they can't do it. Iran, etc. If that coalition, that resistance coalition to the U.S. empire doesn't want them to take a country, it's almost impossible for them to do it now. If this coalition sets its sight on that country and says, we're not going to beat around the bush. We're going to come out and stop. You know, that's what happened in Ethiopia. The U.S. was trying to get the TPLF back into power. The U.S. was trying to overthrow the government. China and Russia stepped in and helped them and stopped the U.S. from doing that. The U.S. is burned up about that. That's the world we're in now. So all that being said is the Neocon project is world domination with not even a regional competitor. The day they sign a deal, and the Russians say, and here, let's keep in mind something. If you're getting a deal, you know the only deal that the Russians will get will be one that favors them. You know the Russians had certain things that they wanted, and they ain't taking a deal if they don't get that. You also know that those things have expanded as a result of the war, so the Russians have even greater demands. You also know that the Russians, because they have the initiative militarily, do not need a deal. They can take what they want with kinetic warfare. So if the powers in Europe want a deal, they're going to have to acquiesce to the Russians. You know, here's the thing about it. To get a deal, the U.S. empire with the Russians is to acknowledge a multipolar world. That's the bottom line. It's to get a deal says, okay, there's a multipolar world, and Russia, we will respect you as one of the poles. That's what it is. Because the position has been the Russians have no say, the Russians have nothing, the Russians are nobody. We don't have to listen to anything they say. We don't have to listen to anything. We'll do what we want on Russia's border, and Russia has no say in it. And Russia basically said, well, we'll see about that. So we'll fight you on our border. So the neocon position was, that's just what we wanted, to fight you on your border. So now we're so much smarter than you that we can manipulate this fight to our advantage, and we'll take your economy apart and everything else because you fell into our trap. And the Russians said, all right, well, we'll see. When you lose, and now you have to give the Russians a deal on their terms, the neocon project is done. The world neocon project is done. The entire world is watching. Everybody's looking, and everybody in the world is going to say, you stepped up to the Russians' border. And the Russians said, you can get off my border. And you said, throw me off. And the Russians said, fair enough. Let's make this happen. That's what it was. I mean, if we sum it up to street talk, it was, we're going to come up to your border and we're going to threaten and harass you. And it's, no, you're not. Get off my border. Get off my border. You're not coming to my border. Who do you think I am? I ain't Libya. I'm not Iraq. You're not coming to my border and threaten me. And the U.S. was like, we are the world hegemon. You can't tell us not to do that. We do anything we want because nobody has the military wherewithal to stop us. And the Russians were like, well, diplomatically, we've tried. We've done everything we can. If we gotta go to Fifth City, we'll do it. But you ain't staying here. You're getting off. And now the neocon said, okay, good. We set this thing up. We think we can stay there and you can't stop us. And not only that, this whole thing is a trap. The whole thing is a trap to take you apart. And the Russians said, fair enough. Let's see what happens. We're going to fight. Because the Russians' position was this. When it comes to war, whoever wins on the battlefield wins. All this crap about, I'm going to sanction you, I'm going to build coalitions, I'm going to go pressure and coerce other countries and say you're either on my side or the Russian side, that's all good and fine. It comes down to who wins on this battlefield, and we're about to win on the battlefield. That's the Russians' position. So now the Africans, the South Americans, everybody's sitting there saying, holy crap, whew, Vladimir Putin's got a pair. He looked at the U.S. empire and said, all right, come on, let's go. Nobody would do that. Nobody would do that. So the world's looking at Putin saying, nobody would do that, man. I mean, what are you, crazy? You're going to fight the U.S. empire? And Putin was like, we got to do what we got to do. We don't have another option. So, okay, we're going to dance. Now, year or two goes by, and the U.S. empire and all of, after the U.S. and all of their minions have thrown everything they can at Russia, and Russia has slapped them down and says, nah, and they got to come crawling to Russia. They have to come crawling back to Russia. Hey, Russia, we need a deal. And Russia's sitting there with their arms crossed. You sure do, don't you? We need a deal. Yeah, I kind of thought you needed a deal. Yeah, you ain't getting a deal you want. You want a deal? Yeah. We will write out a deal and you will sign that deal. That's the deal you're getting. Otherwise than that, you ain't got to call us because we don't need a deal. Funny thing, there are two parties here and one of them needs a deal. One of them don't. So let's see what happens. Here you go. By the way, December 2021, we sent you a list of our demands. Just look over that. Tell us. Remember when Tony Blinken said, I remember this, when he got a list of security demands from Russia a month or two before the war. And what he said was, this is not even a starting point. No, we're not. No, we're not. To get out of here. What's his name? Stoltenberg said the Russians have no say. They have no sphere of influence. And at the point, at the time, my point was, yeah, well, they got a military. So they may not have a diplomatic sphere of influence as far as you can see. They may not have a rhetorical sphere of influence as far as you can see. But as long as they got a military, they have the potential to impose their will on the circumstances. And that's what they chose to do. And I can't say that I blame them. If I'm honest, if the Russians and the Chinese and whoever decided to overthrow the government of Mexico and started pumping stuff in there, I can pretty much assure you that the United States would strike. They wouldn't wait for the Mexico to get filled with Russian and Chinese missiles before they attacked it. They wouldn't wait. And great power of politics, I wouldn't expect them to. That's reality. I'm opposed to war, but I understand reality. I'm a realist, right? Practically speaking, any major power would do that. That's what Russia did. And as soon, see, that's the thing. Because the neocons' plan is for world domination, because their plan is to say, we run the world and nobody can stop us. The minute they have to make a deal with the Russians, that plan is over. Because in order to have world domination, that means everybody, that includes Russia. So now, if they make a deal with Russia, their new plan will be, we're going to dominate the entire world except Russia. That's not world domination. And then what? We're going after China. Well, even if you would take China down, see, think about this. From the perspective of the neocons, I guess. Yes, we'll go to war with China. We will destroy their economy and our economy, but we think ours will build back faster. Everybody's economy will be destroyed. But, as they say, an evil man will burn his own country down so he can rule over the ashes. So they're like, we're going to stop both the China and the U.S. from growth, and therefore we'll grow back faster. Well, the problem with that is that even if you got your way, you haven't taken Russia out. So you know what that would mean now? It would be kind of a reversal of World War II, where in World War II, all of the other countries at the end of the World War, other than the United States, all the other industrial powers were destroyed. So the United States had carte blanche over the world. Nobody had industrial power but us. Everybody had to buy stuff from us, get money from us, everything. So we could rule really the world in the immediacy after World War II, because everybody else was so broken that they couldn't get their say in. This would reverse it. If that happened, that would mean that the United States offense was the economy and military would be broken and crippled based on the fact of how hard they got hit by China. Now, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that China's military got hit and crippled, right? So that China had a hit and cripple military. You know what that would mean? That would mean that like after World War II, that we'd be crippled and crushed, China would be crippled and crushed, and Russia would still be strong. So Russia would now, what would happen if the U.S. went after China, if they walked away from Russia and went after China, and let's say both China and Russia and the U.S. were significantly economically and militarily damaged, the country that would be left standing would be Russia. And that country that would be left standing would side with China and help them build back faster. So even if we got what we wanted, and then the new Russia and China coalition would say, we ain't selling nothing to the United States. Anything you need, you better find somewhere else. And their entire coalition, what do you think Africa and South America would say if we went to war with China, their number one trading partner, and destroyed and wiped out our economy and China's? What do you think South America would, and Africa would say? And what do you think the Arabs would say? Saudi Arabia, their number one oil purchaser. Do you think they'd be happy? They would all say, we're going to work with China to rebuild China. The United States and Europe, you're on your own. You're on your own. You guys don't know how to act. So even if the United States got what they wanted, if they can't break Russia, nothing works. It does no good. You're just setting up Russia to be more powerful. And of course, if you don't break Russia, that means if you go after China, here's the problem you have. You went after Russia, and China was the economic backstop for Russia. They're like, oh, China's sending Russia military stuff. They may have. I doubt it. It's possible. I'm not going to say it's possible, not possible, but China's position is this: what Russia needs is money. You guys are stopping them, or sanction them. But what we got is money. Russia has things that we need. We'll just buy it all from Russia. We'll buy everything we can from Russia 10 times over. And why is that? To make Russia strong. China is an economic backstop for. They're not walking away from Russia because they know that if the neocons take out Russia, they're going after them next. So China will prop Russia up. Now that if when this goes down, or if it goes down and they have to make a deal with Russia, you best believe if the neocons have to make a deal with Russia, that you best believe that Russia's going to say to China, you had our back when the neocons came after you, we got ours. And the odds even being it wouldn't shock me if the Russians provide Kinzhal or some of these other hypersonic missiles to the Chinese, which, I mean, at this point, the U.S. would be going to China to fight China on China's shores. China has a lot of missiles, so it would be problematic for the U.S. But you give the Chinese Kinzhal missiles and give them the ability to mass produce Kinzhal missiles with their industrial capacity. My God, I mean, every one of those missiles, takes you to pieces. You can't do anything to block it. So what happens if the Chinese now are firing thousands of Kinzhals at you? So the bottom line is, I think, if in fact, here's what I can see, if in fact the neocons get pushed into a corner where they have to make a deal with the Russians, which they can't do, somebody else will have to do it. Biden and his neocons don't have the ability to do that. If they do that, the neocons have lost and they kind of go out of power. Number two, if they do that, as the Russians are signing that deal, the Chinese and the Russians are going to be opening up a new front. The Russians and the Chinese are going to both say, okay, the U.S. went after Russia and didn't get it, and now they're going after China. Time to start getting ready. So the Russians and Chinese would then come together because, let's face it, the Chinese have helped the Russians out in their time of need. The Russians and the China would then come together and say, let's start prepping. And I imagine the Chinese would say to the Russians, we need certain things that the Russians have the military technology. Let's be frank. They've got the finest military technology in the world. And if they're providing anti-aircraft, if they're providing hypersonic missile technology, if they're providing some of the other things that they have to the Chinese, with the Chinese industrial capacity, it's going to tilt things in their favor. And the neocons now, having just got their butts kicked out on the Russian border, are they really going to be able to go to the Chinese border for a second helping? It's going to be tough. Going to be tough. So at this point, what I see based on all of this is the only thing left that the neocons have is rhetoric. The only thing that they can do is write articles that the Russians are fighting with shovels and they're out of missiles. That's all they can do. All they can do is say, oh, we don't need a peace deal because the Russians are losing, and we don't need a peace deal because the Russians would then be able to keep the stuff they have, and the Russians can't be allowed to keep Crimea. They can't be allowed to keep the Donbass. They can't be allowed to keep anything. So they still have the same rhetoric that they had in the beginning of the conflict. The problem is that they don't have any way to back that rhetoric up, and it's ringing hollower and hollower, and they're looking like idiots. And now I would imagine the people around them are starting to look at them and say, guys, time out, guys. Feels great to go on TV and say the Russians are losing. Feels wonderful to say they don't have a chance, and oh, they're cowering in the corner, they are out of weapons, all that stuff. It feels great, but we're getting to a point where we're gonna have to face the music, and we need a plan. And neocons, they don't have plans. They just put out fires. So at this point, they don't have the military power anymore in Ukraine to launch in my opinion, a successful offensive. They have the military ability to run into a Russian machine gun nest and get torn to shreds. God, let's hope for the sake of those Ukrainian soldiers and people on the front that doesn't happen. Nobody wants to see lots of people die. They have the ability to back down and start working on a deal. See, think about it. If they don't, let's just say for the sake of argument, one more thing, they don't do their attack. They don't do this military attack. They don't do this offensive. Then what? Do they just keep fighting? Do they just keep trying to hold town, watching Bakhmut fall? Now Marinka's falling. Oh, Liman's looking weak. Oh, Severodonetsk, town after town. Do they just sit there watching them like dominoes, one after the other after the other? And as that happens, it's not the only thing that's happening. As that happens, the unrest is building. We're getting closer to 2024. Can they go into the 2024 election period with this thing on the skids like this, falling apart? Can they go into the 24 election period having just lost a war to the Russians? Can they go? They got nothing right now. They got rhetoric. The only thing they can do is keep using the rhetoric and cross their fingers. So, they got nothing left, and I just don't see how they can, if they do the offensive, massacre, and then massive calls from both inside and outside of the empire to end this thing. Which, if they end it, the neocon dream of world domination is over. If they don't do it, then what? They've been saying they're going to do it. Everybody's waiting for it. All of the people, what do? All of their people, we got to get more weapons. We got to get more tanks. We got to get more artillery to do this. And then what happens? We can't do it. Why? The Russians blew up all our artillery and weapons, so we can't do it. Then how do you, excuse me, and then you have to say to them, look, we came up with the artillery and weapons and everything we needed, but the Russians blew it up, so we can't do it. Okay, what are you going to do now? We need to ask you for more weapons and artillery and stuff like that. We can keep this thing going. Well, I just gave you all I had and they blew it up. Well, I need more. Things start falling apart. You got nothing left. The Neocon Ukraine project is done. It's right now, it is legitimately dead. It is dead. Now, when there is no hope, it's all over. We crash our plane, we're in a desert, we're walking, and it's like, okay, did the plane send out a signal for help? No. Do we have any way to signal for help? No. How much water do we have? We don't have any water. Is everybody okay? No, everybody's got 2 broken legs. So you're in the middle of the desert. Nobody knows you're there. You got no water. Everybody's got 2 broken legs. You can't walk out. And you say, what happens now? We're all going to die in the desert. It's over. That's what we got. This is a accurate and sober evaluation of the people who are stuck in the desert with me. We're all going to die. We can't walk. We got no water, and nobody knows we're here. We're dying in the middle of the desert, right? That would be a sober evaluation of it. So you sit around and say, hey, let's talk before we die or something, or let's just grow, whatever. Now, as this goes, as that goes, that what's the word I want to say? Analogy goes. Now, that's where they're going to be. It's going to be, hey, what happened to the offensive? Either one of two things. Well, it went down and everybody got massacred, or we weren't able to do it. All right, what do we do now? Oh yeah, just let's just hold on for a while and see what happens. Game over. Can we put together another offensive? Yeah, we're gonna start. Look, we're gonna start putting together stuff, and sometime in August we're gonna do another offensive. So could you start sending us more equipment so we can prepare for our next offensive? Next offensive? We didn't have the first offensive. Next offensive, let's plan for an offensive. We haven't had one. No next offensives. And let me ask you this. If I send you more gear and you get ready for the next offensive, don't you think the Russians are going to blow it up again before the next offensive? This is a bad pattern here. I send you weapons, the Russians blow it up. We don't have an offensive, and you ask me for more. And the Russians are like, hey, guys, stop arguing and send more weapons. I mean, they've just got weapons to blow up. How are they going to complain? They're demilitarizing all of NATO. The U.S. is like going to South Korea, Japan. They're going to their of the allies and vassals. Hey, give me all your stuff. And the Russians are like, yeah, keep sending us all your stuff. We'll blow it up. And you won't have it. Good idea. Let's keep this pattern rolling. So that's the bottom line. I mean, well, let's look. We're going to look and see if there's super chats. I don't see a lot, but you never know. Is that one? Here's one. Wow, Eon Moon super sticker. Thanks a lot, Eon Moon. Highly appreciated. See if we get any questions. We always got good stuff in the super chats. And the Iranian Putin says if China and U.S. both hit each other hard in war, countries like India, Brazil, Iran, and Russia will be sitting pretty powerful. Exactly, exactly. If the U.S. were to weaken itself, one of the then these other countries that are strong would be sitting strong. They weaken themselves and they hand it over to everybody else. All right, let's look at Rockfin. Nothing over on Rockfin. I'll just read. It is nearly impossible for the Western governmental confederates to lose. I don't expect them to lose. United it is in the last moment unexpected. Yeah, well, you don't expect them to lose. Look, I understand somebody saying, I don't expect them to lose, right? And I can say that. I never lose. Who you fighting? Mike Tyson. You're going to lose. You may not expect to lose. You may have great rhetoric about losing. You may not feel like you can never lose. You fight Mike Tyson, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. So the reality of kinetic warfare is going to come home to the neocons. They got plans, but their plans ain't working. Anything else? I think that's it. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. I will end by saying this. If you can afford to go to Patreon and $5, $10, $15 a month, that'd be great. Buy Me a Coffee is a great option. Buy Me a Coffee. You just go in there. It'll say, buy Garland a coffee, $5. Easy enough. It'll say, buy how many coffees? 1, 2, or 3, right? 5, however many you want. And then additionally, when you look on Buy Me a Coffee, the option is there to go monthly, just like Patreon. So you can say, I want to buy Garland a monthly coffee and do a monthly subscription, $5 a month, whatever. So if you can afford that, that's great. Don't forget, also, my Cash App information is there. And go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. That is my alternative free speech channel. In case they throw me off, then you can go right to rockfin.com if I get thrown off of YouTube, which is a possibility. It is a possibility. And you can go to rockfin.com and find me there. It doesn't cost anything. They don't have advertisements. They don't do, They don't do any censorship. So everything is going to be there. And last but not least, if you can afford it, when you go to Rockfin, it's $14.99 a month to be a subscriber, to subscribe and support my channel, or a yearly subscription. They give you a couple months off and it ends up being 12 something a month. So if you want to do that, you can subscribe to support the channel on Rockfin, but you don't have to. You can just be a member. You get everything there. All right. Thanks a lot. Peace. I'm out.